So while it's being flooded, social media being flooded with videos and photos and so forth, it's just not going to come on people's feeds like that, because this isn't necessarily going to get views, because black issues, African issues aren't seen as significant to the algorithm, in my opinion. So yeah, man.
But it could also be due to events in other parts of Sudan swallowing up any precious airtime that was dedicated to the crisis.
Right now.
Unlike Sudan's previous civil wars, the current conflict, Kenya hosts the RSF's leader. Aside from, nor are we saying that literally no one has been covering Sudan's atrocity exhibition. Dedicated outlets like Sudan War Monitor have been tracking the horrors since day one. Brave Sudanese journalists have risked death to report from the front lines. In the West, experts like Alex Duvall, analysts like Cameron Hudson, various outlets ranging from The Spectator to our little YouTube channel have relentlessly covered this topic, trying to make the world care. And yet, no one gives a shit. Aside from the very opening days of the war, Sudan never really trended on social media. No mass protests called for the governments of the United States, France, or Great Britain to stop selling weapons to the RSF's main backer, the United Arab Emirates, despite mountains of evidence that Abu Dhabi was funneling Western military kit to the paramilitaries. No one boycotted Emirates Airline, hung Sudanese flags, or tweeted #I stand with Sudan. And this is just as true of countries in Africa as it is of Europe, the Americas, or Asia. Days after al-Fasher fell, the African Union proudly tweeted about its...
What do you think, people? Do you think conflicts that happen within the global south, conflicts that happen within Africa, or simply black people in the African diaspora, do you think those issues are underrepresented in media? Let me know. Post it in the comments.
#silencing the guns and #agenda 2063 aspirations, including, quote, the Union's capacity for early warning, political engagement and timely action to prevent atrocities. Of the atrocities that had just taken place in Sudan, there wasn't even a mention. Meanwhile, neighbouring nations helped fuel the conflict. Chad allows the UAE to fly weapons for the RSF into a secret airbase near the border. Kenya hosts the RSF's leader, a warlord known as Hemeti, as he seeks legitimacy for his parallel government built upon the bones of Darfur's...
So who is Hemeti? Who is Hemeti? Yeah, Hemeti. Hemeti is a leader of the RSF. So he's a very significant political figure on this, and he's the person vying for power on behalf of the UAE.
Black African minorities. Libya under General Haftar allows smuggling to the RSF across its borders. Further afield, Russia long supplied the paramilitaries before switching to support the SAF when they appeared to be winning. Now, there are some who would say it's in poor taste for me, a white European, to sit here criticizing African leaders for their inaction on Sudan when my own government is doing oh so very little to help. And to that I'd say, well done, genius. That's the entire point. By this I mean the blind eye turned towards Sudan's suffering is a global problem. This is not some Biden-era meme about white people like me being too racist to care. Rather, it's a crisis that the wider world has collectively closed its eyes to. You can travel today to East Asia or South America and meet people who have passionately held opinions about Gaza or Ukraine, but for whom Sudan's war is not even a quarrel in a faraway country between people of whom we know nothing. And let's be clear, this is not and never has been a small war. Even before the slaughter of tens of thousands in al-Fasher, Sudan's conflict was shaping up to be one of the worst so far of this century. The exact figures of how many have died are open to debate because, as Nathaniel Raymond of Yale's Humanitarian Research Lab has repeatedly noted, many who would do the counting are dead or displaced. By that he means that so many hospitals and morgues have been destroyed, so many doctors killed, so many academics and potential monitors driven to flee, that accurate data is almost impossible to come by. And this compounds a pre-existing problem in Sudan. Exceptionally poor record keeping. Health Policy Watch points out that during the pandemic, it's estimated that Khartoum accurately recorded a mere 3 to 6% of all COVID deaths. So, tracking the war's impact would be tricky even if it hadn't seen most hospitals reduced to rubble. But tricky is not the same as impossible, and there have been rigorous attempts to reach at least a decent estimate of the toll Sudan's war has wrought. One of the most respected was released by the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine at the end of 2024. Focusing only on the first 14 months of the war, from April 2023 to June 2024, and centered only on the Greater Khartoum area, it estimated that the capital region had seen some 61,000 deaths in that time period. And here, we do need to put in an important caveat alert. The 61,000 figure was all-cause deaths, meaning it included people who died of normal things like cancer or car accidents, and who would have likely died even without the war. Remove those, and the excess deaths from this era, a measure I'm sure we can all remember from COVID, was closer to 26,000. On the other hand, that's 26,000 people killed in 14 months, and that was just in Khartoum State, a place that hadn't yet seen truly savage fighting. While the researchers refrained from estimating an overall death for the wider war, they did note that the true number of fatalities likely exceeded the highest estimates then available. Well, at that time, the highest estimate was from the now former US Special Envoy to Sudan, Tom Perriello, who stated in May 2024 that 150,000 may have been killed. He since revised that figure sharply upwards, telling the New York Times in September this year that the death toll had likely crossed 400,000. That would make Sudan's civil war one of the worst conflicts fought in decades.
So right now, 400,000 is a rough estimate of the people that have passed away or casualties during the Sudan Civil War. However, this information was supplied by the US envoy. So God knows how long ago this was done, and the death toll is usually probably a lot higher. And does this death toll also include all the genocides that have also been committed just recently, or is this just military combatants?
More to the point, it shows that there were credible estimates out there of the true extent of the fighting long before al-Fasher fell. Credible estimates that the international community basically responded to with the diplomatic equivalent of a sad face emoji. Yet it's not just the sheer scale of the fighting that makes it so goddamn weird that this war has been overlooked. Nor is it just the atrocities, it's also the fact that the Darfur region of Sudan may now be playing host to a genocide. If there's one thing that you need to know about the Rapid Support Forces, it's that they are a direct descendant of the Janjaweed militia that carried out the original Darfur genocide in the early years of the 21st century. In its simplest form, that genocide was an attempt by nomadic Arab herder tribes to cleanse Darfur of settled black African groups like the Fur, Masalit, or Zaghawa. While such distinctions would not be visible to Western eyes, drop a member of either side into Midtown America and they both would be coded as black, in Sudan, it was enough to unleash a slaughter. If that sounds a little bit like the more things change, the more they stay the same, well, know that there's one crucial difference. In the 2000s, the Darfur genocide was international.
Remember I mentioned that Sudan's a former British colony, so a lot of these ethnic identities, such as Arabness, and such as, not to say that they didn't exist, and not to say that they weren't already foreign or already part of the African infrastructure, but we have to take into consideration that they definitely were exacerbated by colonialism, especially by the British, which had a philosophy of divide and conquer. So often, like I said, it's an affinity to privilege that will often cause people to treat their tribal or ethnic groups as a football team. So in this instance, under the British administration, which was administered through Egypt, those that were Arab, you understand, especially if you're part of the Arab social elite that were dealing directly with the British, were probably given the social status and privilege over traditional black Africans, because until the point where there were certain resources on their lands they were aware of that they could exploit, this was the main power point and pressure point they could apply power through, the Arabness identity. So you have to take that into consideration. It's not to say that it's a conflict between Arabs and Africans. It's those that have an affinity to whiteness, you understand, affinity to Arabness, often that actually say, for with example, the Janjaweed and the RSF. I mean, these people that are from these groups are often from nomadic Arab communities, and often they live within the same regions as these African ethnic groups. You understand, such as Darfur and so forth, and the Nuba Mountains. And what you have to take into consideration is that they live in the same area. There's the same skin complexion, probably a few facial features and hair textures that differentiates them, but it's most of their lifestyle that dictates their differentiation. The Africans are settled and they're nomads, and there's similar issues in the Sahel and areas like northern Nigeria and Niger as well. But there is due to global warming and due to expansion of the desert and due to also the concepts of private land ownership and these things coming into being, there's been long conflict between these communities. You understand? However, what gives the what's it called again, the nomadic Arab communities that would then join the Janjaweed and that would form into the RSF an advantage in their conflicts was their affinity to Arabness. They could use that to get funding from the UAE, which are also Arab as well, and in return, the UAE, which wants gold, which wants oil, can give them their plunder, you understand, from these regions, in return to funding them. And what would they get out of it? In return, domination of these areas, which essentially they are from as well. So it's not necessarily a conflict between Arabs and Africans, you understand, but due to a colonial mentality and due to how power works, you understand, this is how it's manifesting amongst certain groups, you understand, and as a result, that's why you're seeing ethnic genocide against. Remember, these people probably look the same, they're probably from the same area, you understand, and it's only now it's reaching its full extent that they're actually entering the cities, you understand, the RSF and so forth, but a lot of the RSF aren't even from the cities, they're from the rural areas. So you have to take into consideration these nuances and complexities in the war. It's not even, it was probably a bit more clear cut in the original Sudanese Civil War, which resulted in the creation of South Sudan and Sudan, where yes, they had a similar issue, but at least most of the black Africans were Christians, you understand, and obviously also South Sudanese are a lot darker. But in this instance, unless you are aware of the political differences and motives, and you are outside looking in, it just looks like Africans killing each other. And that's why I say it's not simply a war of Arabs versus Africans. There is a huge neo-colonial and neoliberal factor to it as well, that is incentivizing these ethnic disparities.
National news people cared about it. Here's how the Holocaust Encyclopedia describes that time. Human rights advocates organized public protests and campaigns in communities around the United States and globally. Today, the RSF tries to finish the work its predecessor organization started. The idea of mass protests against their crimes seems just like the stuff of fantasy, though. Few regular people today even know that a genocide is happening in Darfur. The reasons for this are complex and include the Sudan War having the misfortune to run parallel to two conflicts the world really does care about, Ukraine and Gaza. But it could also be due to events in other parts of Sudan swallowing up any
with me. This was another part of my dissertation that I never really got to go into fully. And you know what, people? If I get enough love, yeah, I'm gonna say the name of the dissertation: The Imperial Propaganda Machine v. The Voice of Haiti. If you guys comment enough in the YouTube videos, on the stream, everything, I'll turn this into a full video, a full documentary, so you guys can understand what I'm talking about. Yeah, show enough love, I'll turn it into content, so that way I know you guys want it. But yeah, to break down is you can see these implicit biases manifest in legacy media, whether it's Fox News or whether it's CNN. So it doesn't matter whether it's left or right, both function within the same advertisement model, and both have their limitations under neoliberalism and under power structures